I'm very happy to be here, invited by the Young Academy of Sweden, here in the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences here in Stockholm, to talk about science and fiction. And this is the title that was given to me, How the Big Bang Theory Brought Science to the Top Ratings. So thank you for being here. That was a really wonderful welcome and a beautiful prize and a beautiful marble stone. And it's been wonderful to learn about the Young Swedish Academy. And we had a few ideas yesterday where I had a magnificent tour of this building. And Anna has been a wonderful host to me, and I've met so many people through her. And of course, Torsten, it's been just such a delight and honor to meet you. And so I'm here on behalf of four people, not just myself. We heard about Bill Prady and Chuck Lorre, so number two and number four on the slides, the creators of the show back in 2006 and 2007, and Steve Milaro, who is the other executive producer, as you heard about. And so they don't know what I'm going to say, but on behalf of them all, thank you. Okay. So who am I? Just a little bit. As you heard, I'm a particle physicist. I got my PhD at the University of Chicago at something known as the Collider Detector at the Fermilab Tevatron. That is actually the predecessor with the Large Hadron Collider, which we know so well now from the discovery of the Higgs boson. I did spend 2 years in Europe at CERN before the Large Hadron Collider was built on an experiment known as CHORUS, where we searched for neutrino oscillations. And right after that, exactly that type of neutrino oscillations was found, but with different parameters. And I've spent, actually, it's hard to believe I wrote that down, 20 years now. I've been a professor at UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles. I've studied top quarks, I've looked for supersymmetry, and as we'll see a little later, we've been hunting for neutrinos in Antarctica, and I'm on my way next week to continue with my research in the Large Hadron Collider. But I think what's most important is who I am not. I am not a television writer. So since 2006, I've been the science consultant for the TV show, The Big Bang Theory, which has now completed 9 full seasons. You're about to hit the end here in Sweden, and 207 episodes. So if you're just beginning now to get to like the show, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. So I'm here because of being the physics consultant and our friends here that we can see in the little picture. So I wanted to show a little clip about a little bit of drama that happened on the show. So the reason I show that is I can tell my Physics 1A students that I really have in my life needed to use the inclined plane to calculate that the force of gravity is reduced by the sine of the angle. And one of the first things I contributed was the original script had the cosine. So I really did need it. So just a little history here. The Big Bang Theory started with a pilot in 2006. And a pilot is like a research and development, or R&D project, and parts of it the people in the production liked, and parts of it they wanted to change, and we did it again in a second pilot, which became ultimately the first of the 207 episodes. And I think that's an important thing that I've realized. It's not just about science giving to the entertainment world, but I've learned a lot about the entertainment world, and it's a very empirical process. People laugh or they don't, or things work or they don't. And so just like we build prototypes, the people in the entertainment world make pilot episodes. And it started with the first season with about 8 to 10 million viewers, and it's grown now to about 20 million viewers, and that's just the first showing in the first week in the US. It doesn't include reruns, which are everywhere. It doesn't include international viewing. So a lot of people are seeing it, and the writers right now are already starting to think about the 10th season. So in the beginning, way back in the early part, it wasn't a problem for me. There was an experimental particle physicist, like with Leonard, which I could totally do. I could fake it at being a theoretical particle physicist. There was an engineer, I could work on that, and even an astrophysicist, Raj. There's actually here a hidden hero that many of you don't see, is a lot of these what are called props. For example, here is the robot that's being used in the Robot War episode. Scott London is the property master. He's been around for the entire time. And so all these really cute little devices from the robot to the space toilet, all of these things that are so wonderful to look at, that are almost like another character in the show, I just wanted to draw your attention to. But then, like all good comedies, trouble ensued, at least for me. The biologists entered. So Beverly Hofstadter was the Torsten of the group, a neuroscientist, but also a psychiatrist. and Bernadette is a molecular biologist, and Amy Farrah Fowler was a neuroscientist who's played by Mayim Bialik, who actually has an undergrad and PhD in neuroscience from my own university, UCLA. So getting that part right was a bit harder. Luckily, I have friends to reach out to, and Mayim will make sure nothing wrong will get on, but I want to make sure she doesn't have to work too hard in that regard. So I have friends at UCLA, Mayank Mehta, I have a friend from the Salk Institute, Ricardo Gil da Costa, that all help me a lot with a lot of the words you see when they're dissecting brains and things like that. So what kind of things do I do? I talk to the writers and the showrunners like Steve Milaro, and they've come and visited UCLA and they met the students and the postdocs in their labs. There was a laser experiment going on, and they had black curtains to keep the laser light, stray laser light, from coming out of the experimental area. And the actors, when they came to visit, said, "Oh, it's curtains, just like the theater." Sometimes we have lunch. But mostly what happens is I get emails and phone calls from the writers. Sometimes it's overnight, I get some time to think, and other times it's we're in the writer's room right now and we need to fill a line, which is a little harder. We heard about whiteboards. So in addition to the props that you heard about with Scott London, the sets are run by a wonderful group of people, including Ann Shea and Chris Harwood. And I send what's on the whiteboards in advance to the set dressers. It's often related to the episode's plot. If you hear them arguing about whether giant ants can exist, you can look at the whiteboards and look for the square cube law. Things like that. Sometimes there isn't much science in the episode, and so it's a bit of a reach. So something topical that's going on, like the discovery of gravitational waves, might make it on. And other times I'm just really stuck, and so don't try to read too much into the whiteboards. But it really isn't jokey. I don't like it, actually, when I watch a movie and I see really jokey physics boards, so we don't do that. Now, in fact, here's a little bit of that's actually not a set, because if an actor touches it, a set turns into a prop. So in that case, he touched that board, which is all about graphene, which people here can probably recognize, because you had a lecture afterwards by Konstantin Novoselov, the Nobel laureate, who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery and making of graphene. And so he showed that image I just showed you of Sheldon here in Stockholm. So now we get to have a meta viewing of this, of showing the picture of Professor Novoselov showing a picture of Sheldon working on graphene. So maybe someone will take a picture of this and we'll keep going year after year. Okay. So a lot of times it has to do with what's going on in physics. And so what I have here is, I didn't realize that every time they're talking to me, they're taking notes. So here is a clip. It's actually two clips smashed together from the same scene. So there's a little bit of a jump, which messes up the rhythm. But this just was an example of just some discussion I'd had with the writers when they'd asked me what's new with physics, and I had no idea we would wind up insulting my colleagues in front of millions of people. So those physicists in the audience know we're always hearing the words centrifugal force and centripetal force used backwards. And I believe what happened was in the script it actually was backwards, centrifugal force. And so I wrote back to Bill Prady and said, well, actually it's centripetal force. And I wrote him a few words about explaining why it was centripetal, which then, in the meantime, he had realized that he got it backwards and rewrote the lines, and our emails crossed in the mail, and he had basically written what I had just explained to him. So that made him feel good about his physics and made me feel good about my comedy writing, my non-existent comedy writing. Okay. So the other thing you'll see that the sets people put on are posters. And in fact, we've seen, if you look around, I meant to look to actually find some Nobel Prize posters. I just picked some up here from Anna, so they'll be showing up next season. And if any of you here are doing work on, oops, how come this is not advancing? Just do this. If you want your poster on TV, we can use them, even little small pieces. So you can always just look me up and mail them to me. And I can't guarantee we're going to use them. They don't judge you on the science. They judge you on the color, things like that. But so don't feel bad if they don't use your poster, but I would love to have your posters and put even small pieces. I'm actually the vulture who goes around the department picking all those little flyers of expired conferences and so forth. And that's what winds up. And so what else do I do? I work with the prop master. There's Scott London, who I told you about, who made an exact copy of one of our graduate students' integrated ion trap and mass spectrometer integrated ion trap and time of flight mass spectrometer. It looked so good, I wanted Scott to come to my next funding review and just start building some equipment. It'd be a lot cheaper and easier. Other times they send over a car and we give them piles of equipment. Not all of it's my equipment. Sometimes I trade that for a dinner with one of my faculty friends. It all kind of works out fine. It's been wonderful to have YouTube, because if I want to explain what's going on, you can almost always find a YouTube video of what you have in mind. And then they can do anything. And you'll notice lots of foil covering the vacuum flanges, just like real life. Very seldomly I do work with, it's more of a special case, I work with wardrobe. I mentioned that I work on high energy neutrinos, which we look for in Antarctica. So there I am with one of my students and my team members there out on the Ross Ice Shelf at the Long Duration Ballooning Facility, which behind us are the tallest buildings in Antarctica. And for some reason they thought that was funny, and so they actually purchased the coats. And then we had another trip to Greenland a few years after that, and we used one of those coats. And the acknowledgments of our paper thanks Warner Brothers. Probably the most regular part of my job is I look over scripts in advance. Much of the science is already correct. The writers know a lot of science. And by the way, the show isn't just smart about science. You've probably noticed if you watch the show, it's smart about history, it's smart about philosophy, it's smart about all sorts of things. And very often I learn something when I'm reading the script. So that's a big help. So sometimes I just have to tweak it a little bit. Other times they just give me something in brackets which says, science to come, which is whatever experiment Leonard is working on. For example, I think he was working on verifying an experiment that someone else had done, and then his mother asked why he wasn't doing anything original. But we try to get to some cutting-edge topics, but it can't be exactly something someone else is doing. It can't be something where they win a Nobel Prize, as far as I can tell, because they live in our world, and we know who wins the Nobel Prizes. So things like that are a little tricky. Maybe you might find the very first episodes of the first season, we hadn't quite laid that ground rule yet, but once you get beyond the first dozen episodes for sure, even half dozen episodes, it's all stuff that these people could live in our world. And what I really love the best is when we get to do these freshman physics stunts, so pushing the box up the stairs, twirling the olive in the glass. My friend Simon Swarty had not yet heard of The Big Bang Theory. It was still the first season when that was shown. And he was half watching, and he heard someone talk about centrifugal force, and he was like, oh yeah, the usual. And then he just heard, of course, Leonard explaining exactly the correct description of centripetal force, and he told me he fell out of his chair and that he had to watch the rest of the episode, and then he saw my name in the credits. So that was, and you know, physical humor, physics, seems like it should go together. This is filmed in front of a live studio audience. That laughter you hear is not a laugh track. That is real laughter for the actual joke. These are filmed in about 3 hours. These are filmed in front of this live studio audience in order. So they're actually watching a story. It's very much like a play. You only typically see those 3 walls. It's a live audience. This is the closest I think that a lot of people get to going to the theater in our modern day, is watching this kind of situation comedy. There's sometimes last-minute changes. They're pretty rare. Mostly I'm there just to talk to the writers about future shows, but occasionally they'll make a new joke that has some science in it, and I'll help. And then I bring some physics students and other people along to talk with the writers, and maybe they might pick up a story here and there. One of the sad parts is, you know, there's entertainment reporters out there. They've been reporting on sitcoms for 50 years, so they're looking for a fresh angle. Unfortunately, the science consultant is a fresh angle, so I wind up having to do a lot of interviews. What I don't do, as I said, I'm not a writer. I don't do any character development. I don't create any stories. I don't read any dialogue. And I definitely don't write any jokes. But what I can do to influence these things is and I think it actually wouldn't work. If you try to come with maybe this is a bit about what I think I've picked up what little I've picked up from being around these brilliant entertainment folks, is if you set out to send out a science message and that's your intent, I think people can smell propaganda a mile away. But when you have people that are really just trying to tell an interesting story and a fun story, but those people love science, it's going to come out in a natural way. And I bring physicists with me, as I said, sometimes students, and most recently we had this gentleman over here, way over on that poster, Professor Art McDonald, who was actually one of my first professors and is one of the most recent Nobel laureates in physics, came. So anywhere from undergraduates to Nobel laureates come most weeks, and the writers have given them an affectionate name, the Geek of the Week. So Art was very happy to be called the Geek of the Week. So what can be learned from my experience? It turns out, and I only discovered this years later, there's actually academic studies by regular faculty members that have been done studying what the experience is of science consultants in film and television. And what was amazing was people had positive and negative experiences, and my experience matched so closely to what was happening at the positive end of the spectrum. The fact that I really talked to everyone from the top showrunner down to every other member of the departments. And everyone, the message has gotten out. They don't want me to hold back on any corrections. They really want it to be right. Sometimes I'm even like, well, it doesn't matter that it isn't right. It's funny. And they're like, nope, we have to get it right. So maybe somebody here might find themselves doing this. There is even a Swedish entertainment industry, which would be great to get a lot of people involved. What's a little different about my work with the show from working in my research career is typically if I get a question from a colleague, I have a couple days to answer, to think about it and compose a reasonable answer. Usually here, they're asking me a question, it's because they're taping it right now, or they need to buy a piece of equipment right now to use it tomorrow. So they don't take a lot of my time, but they take the sort of priority interrupt for those of you in computer science. So you need to be available. And often, I don't really know what they're looking for, so I usually give them lots of options. Short answers, long answers, fancy things, not fancy. And they know there's a certain rhythm to the dialogue. Chuck Lorre, who we talked about before, was a musician before he was a comedy writer, and the dialogue has, they will choose a word with the right syllables to have the right rhythm. And actually that's something maybe people don't know, is that the actors, in these 207 episodes, I don't ever think I've seen the actors ad lib make up a single word. Everything they say is either on the page or changed by the writers right then, and that's because of the rhythm. So I'm obviously not going to read this, but there's just an example of a long list. You can go look up academic. You can search on David Kirby, who's done a lot of great work, and some of the others. It's really interesting to read about. A little more is written about film and television. So this outreach, we have about 20 million viewers. They're skewed young. The freshman physics is correct. Occasionally I can stop a bad thing. And ultimately, this is a sitcom ensemble. It's a family. They're going to be flawed, but you're going to like them. And so if people like these characters and they're physicists, that should and biologists, that should reflect well on scientists. So related to that, what I wrote for a very, very early talk, maybe there's some junior high school kid out there who is going to get interested in science because of this. And so back in the first season, after I'd written that, there was a little quick, let me just give you a little quick piece here. So that number, by the way, they had a very different number that had gotten off the internet. Now, of course, the physicists in the audience know there's no number which is correct about how fast the Earth is moving because it's got to be relative to something, but at least my number was less wrong than theirs. And then I got this email, I'll just read you the parts in red, from Olivia, a sophomore in Barrington High School, huge fan of Big Bang Theory, and I'll just read the part in red. Leonard asked Leslie on a date. She proposes instead of his invitation, they should kiss first to see if the relationship will work out. And then he talks about the world didn't move when they kissed except for the 383 miles it would work anyway. I was a bit puzzled by this statement. It seemed like a very high number for a very short time. So then we have all of this. But then my first thought was the following, and I won't read all these numbers, but she figured out the latitude of Pasadena, which is quite, sounds tropical compared to Stockholm. She uses the radius of the Earth and so forth and figures it out. And then but then she has a little bit of a correction. Maybe she meant not the rotation of the Earth, but the Earth as it moves around the sun, which that gets closer. So what's going on? So I answered, to make the calculation is another parameter you've not considered. Not only is the Earth revolving around the sun, but the sun itself is revolving in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. The period of this orbit is about 250 million years. Sometimes it's called a cosmic year. And so, fantastic. And then she goes and does it. And she gets it down to 379 miles, which is only about 4 miles off from the correction, which I assure you I didn't do the calculation to anywhere near that. They chose 3, 8, and 3 probably because of the syllables. But I didn't. But then I wanted, of course, being the professor, I followed up with the question of, well, what is the speed of the galaxy? And ultimately led her to realize that there really is no correct answer. So finally, I just want to again thank all of you for listening to this. Thank Anna and Torsten and the Swedish Young Academy. And finally, just to prove to you that I don't tell any of the jokes, here I am in the session chamber where the permanent secretary announces the Nobel Prize. I sent this picture yesterday to Steve Malaro, the showrunner, executive producer, and writer of The Big Bang Theory, and he said, "Oh, you should have left a Post-it note." So, thank you.